$40 trillion.
Yeah.
That is the U.S. national debt as of today. And, we aren't just coasting at that number. We are currently slapping another $1 trillion onto that pile every 5 months.
It's wild.
It is. So today we're taking a deep dive into the Morning Sixpack newsletter. This is the August 2026 edition written by Bill Davis.
Right.
And we really want to look at how high-level Washington chaos, these massive abstract numbers and these political fights, how that actually trickles down to hit your wallet.
And your daily commute, frankly.
Exactly. Now, really quick note before we jump in, we are covering some highly charged political figures today from across the spectrum. Donald Trump, Joe Biden, John Ossoff, RFK Jr.
The whole cast of characters.
The whole cast. And we are absolutely not taking political sides here. Our mission today is strictly to impartially report and, just unpack the claims and the ideas exactly as they're presented in source material. We're not endorsing any of them.
Right. Just laying out the facts as they are.
Exactly. So, okay, let's unpack this. How did the math get this broken?
Well, the velocity is what should really grab everyone's attention here. I mean, it took 10 months for the national debt to jump from 38 trillion to 39 trillion.
Okay.
But that next trillion, going from 39 to 40?
Yeah.
That only took 5 months.
Wait, 5 months?
5 months?
Like exactly half the time?
Yeah. Roughly $1 trillion in new debt every 5 months now.
Jeez. How does a government even spend $1 trillion in 5 months? I mean, when you break it down like that, it sounds like a family taking out a second mortgage just to pay the minimum balance on a totally different credit card.
Right.
And eventually, the interest payments alone are just going to eat your entire paycheck. I mean, since Washington has spent decades proving fiscal restraint is just a campaign promise, at what point does the math simply break?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it's a much better way to look at it than just saying, quote unquote, government spending.
Yeah.
Because the drivers behind this acceleration, they're completely bipartisan.
Right.
You have the massive COVID stimulus spending that happened under both Trump and Biden.
Oh, yeah.
You have the ongoing revenue impacts of Trump's tax cuts. You have the current Biden administration dealing with just ballooning defense costs.
Yeah, which is tied to the war in Iran, right?
Largely tied to the ongoing conflict in Iran, yes. And then underneath all of that, you have the immense baseline costs of Social Security and Medicare.
Right. But, I mean, I get that the numbers are huge, but honestly, people have been screaming about the national debt for my entire life.
Oh, right.
Why should the average person care today? The sky hasn't fallen yet,
Well, because you're already paying the bill.
Even if I don't see it.
Right. Even if you don't see a specific, line item for it on your tax return. Michael A. Peterson from the Peter G. Peterson Foundation, he highlights this exact mechanism in the source.
Okay.
When the government needs to borrow $1 trillion in 5 months, they have to issue bonds. And to convince investors to buy those bonds, instead of, say, putting their money elsewhere in the private sector, the government has to offer competitive interest rates.
Ah, okay. So the government is basically sucking up all the available investment capital in the room?
Precisely. It crowds out private investment.
Yeah.
And because everyday lending rates, like your mortgage rate or the interest on a car loan, those are heavily influenced by government bond yields.
Right.
So your personal cost to buy a house or a car goes up. Businesses face higher borrowing costs too, which, puts pressure on what they can afford to pay in wages.
Wow. So when a listener is frustrated that they can't afford a home right now because of high interest rates,
Yeah,
they are directly feeling the physical weight of that $40 trillion debt.
exactly. And it actually gets more precarious. The Bipartisan Policy Center warns that we're on track to hit a $41.1 trillion debt limit by sometime between late winter and midsummer of 2027.
Wow. Next year.
Yeah. And that's just the baseline scenario. The real danger, what their CEO, Margaret Spellings, is warning about, is that this massive debt burden leaves the U.S. with zero financial cushion.
Meaning if something goes wrong, we just don't have the cash to fix it.
Exactly. If an external shock hits, whether that's, a massive AI disruption to the workforce or a sudden domestic recession or
wider global war.
Right, a wider global war, we simply do not have the fiscal flexibility to absorb it. The engine is already redlining.
Man. And that lack of a financial cushion, I mean, that means that when something happens halfway across the world, we feel it immediately.
Yes.
Because we're already stretched to the breaking point, which I guess that brings us directly to the Middle East.
It does.
Because the geopolitical landscape there is shifting so rapidly, and it's instantly changing the numbers on your local gas station sign.
Yeah, the newsletter details a major escalation rattling energy markets right now. Donald Trump has publicly threatened Iran, and importantly, any countries doing business with it, with what he called the most crushing economic operation ever.
And this was after Iran rejected a U.S. agreement, right?
Correct.
Okay, because the source points out that oil prices jumped immediately on that news. I think it was roughly 3%.
Yeah, Brent crude hit over $94 a barrel, $94.31 to be exact.
And WTI was like $88.67 or something.
Right.
But I don't entirely understand the geographic bottleneck driving the panic here. I mean, does announcing economic warfare actually isolate Iran? Or does the uncertainty just, instantly punish American drivers at the pump before any actual policy is enacted?
Well, it comes down to risk premiums and a tiny stretch of water called the Strait of Hormuz.
Okay.
Global commodities markets don't wait for a bill to be signed, right?
Yeah.
They price in the risk of supply disruptions immediately. And the Strait of Hormuz is one of the world's most vital maritime choke points for oil. Normally, you have more than 100 massive vessels moving millions of barrels of oil through there every single day.
Every single day. And right now, what does the traffic look like today?
According to maritime data from Kepler, cited in the newsletter, on Wednesday, only 12 ships traveled through the strait.
12, down from 100.
Just 12. It is severely disrupted by a U.S. naval blockade and ongoing Iranian attacks.
Jeez.
And then you couple that physical bottleneck with the United Arab Emirates suddenly halting all trade with Tehran.
Oh, right, because they accused Iran of firing 2 ballistic missiles at them.
Exactly, which Iran denies. But you put all that together, and you have a perfect recipe for market panic.
So the irony here is that Trump is promising to completely isolate Iran economically, but the mechanics of the global oil market mean you can't actually isolate a shock like that.
No, you can't fence off the oil market.
Right. The pain of that isolation hits American drivers on day one.
It does. And, while international posturing is creating these massive economic bottlenecks abroad, we're dealing with literal physical bottlenecks right here at home.
I'm so glad you brought that up because the newsletter pivots to this completely different kind of breakdown that's happening in our own backyards.
Yeah.
It's the physical reality of climate actively colliding with our outdated infrastructure planning. I mean, federal scientists just confirmed this past July was the hottest month on record in the contiguous U.S.
It was brutal.
And our roads are simply not built for those temperatures.
No, they're quite literally buckling under the strain.
Okay, the specific detail in the source about Greenville, Texas, it's terrifying.
It's unbelievable.
So it was a section of U.S. Highway 69,
Right.
And it absorbed so much extreme heat that the concrete expanded and erupted into a 2-foot-high ramp in the middle of the interstate.
A literal ramp.
A ramp. And a pickup truck hit it at 30 miles an hour and went completely airborne. The newsletter described it as a Dukes of Hazzard stunt ramp.
I mean, when your morning commute turns into an aerial stunt jump, the infrastructure debate is no longer just an abstract policy discussion.
Seriously.
And Texas isn't an isolated incident either. Wisconsin had to issue statewide warnings to drivers about pavement buckling.
Wow.
Heat-related failures forced highway closures in Maryland and Louisiana. And in New Jersey, a vertical lift bridge got stuck 4 separate times this summer.
Because of the heat.
Yeah, the heat expanded the metal components so much that the bridge physically could not operate. It completely halted boat traffic.
And the railways are having the exact same physics crisis, right? The extreme heat expands the steel rails until they warp into what engineers call sun kinks.
Right, which can easily cause a train to derail.
Yeah. The Washington Metro is out there constantly monitoring their tracks to see if the steel hits 135 degrees.
Yep.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. The core issue here seems to be the baseline data we use to build the country in the first place.
Exactly.
It's like using a 1990s farmer's almanac to pack for a vacation today. You're preparing for a climate that just doesn't exist anymore.
Well, the Federal Highway Administration actually sounded the alarm on this back in 2023.
Really?
Yeah. They explicitly told engineers to stop relying on historical climate records for new projects. They urged a shift toward predictive climate models instead.
Because the old data is obsolete. But how on earth do you retrofit a whole country for this? We can't just tear up every highway in America tomorrow.
No, you can't. So the solutions they're testing are this wild mix of high-tech and comically simple.
Okay.
On the high-tech side, you have cities experimenting with cool pavement coatings in places like Phoenix, Los Angeles, and San Antonio. Or they're mixing asphalt with specific polymers to make it more rigid at higher temperatures.
Okay, that makes sense.
But on the railways, Union Pacific is running a pilot program where they literally just paint the steel rails white.
Paint them white.
Just paint them white.
Decades of engineering, billions of dollars in infrastructure funding, and the answer to our entire supply chain derailing is a bucket of white paint to reflect the sun.
I mean, sometimes the simplest physics, just reflecting solar radiation instead of absorbing it, is the fastest Band-Aid you can apply while the longer-term structural issues get debated.
That's wild, but applying those long-term fixes requires serious leadership at the top.
It does.
We need people to set new standards for our infrastructure, for our public health, our military. And that brings us to this incredible bottleneck in Washington, deciding who actually gets to set those standards.
Oh, yeah.
The newsletter dives into the absolute chaos happening right now at the Food and Drug Administration.
The FDA is at a critical juncture right now, and the confirmation process for its new head is turning into a proxy war for about 5 different political factions.
Okay, let's lay out the players here because it's a lot. Donald Trump nominated Dr. Heidi Overton to lead the FDA.
Right.
She's a physician, and she's the deputy director of the White House Domestic Policy Council. And she is stepping in to replace Dr. Marty Makary, who resigned earlier this year. But she is walking into a completely impossible job description. I mean, look at this Venn diagram. She has to somehow balance Trump's agenda for faster cures and lower drug prices with traditional Republican desires to deregulate industry and the Make America Healthy Again, or MAHA movement, which is led by Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Those are deeply, deeply conflicting mandates.
Yeah.
Because the MAHA movement is highly focused on removing additives from foods, they want to aggressively regulate agricultural pesticides, and they really question traditional vaccine schedules.
Right.
And that is a direct clash with traditional industry-friendly Republican deregulation.
Totally. And you see that clash in the sheer variety of opposition she's facing from basically every corner of the political map.
Yeah, it's coming from all sides.
So you have Republican Senator Bill Cassidy, who chairs the Senate HLP committee. He's a doctor himself. And he says he has strong concerns about her management experience. But the kicker is that he called her involvement with Trump's order for separate measles, mumps, and rubella vaccines almost disqualifying.
Yes.
Can you explain the mechanics of that? Why is separating the MMR vaccine such a massive lightning rod?
Well, in public health, the combined MMR vaccine is a cornerstone of childhood immunization.
Okay.
It's highly effective, and it requires fewer shots for kids. But the push to separate them, so offering a measles shot, then waiting, then a mumps shot, then waiting, then a rubella shot, that's largely driven by vaccine skeptics.
Oh, I see.
And major medical and pediatric groups heavily oppose separating them because it complicates the schedule. And historically, that leads to lower overall vaccination rates and higher risks of dangerous outbreaks.
Okay.
So for a mainstream physician senator like Cassidy, endorsing that separation is seen as abandoning established medical consensus.
Got it. Okay, so she's catching fire from the traditional medical wing of the Republican Party.
Yes.
But then she is also taking hits from the left. Democratic Senator Patty Murray called her a far-right anti-abortion extremist. Right.
And incredibly, she is even taking fire from the MAHA activists themselves. Kelly Ryerson, who's a prominent pesticide critic, accused Overton of just echoing industry talking points at a White House roundtable.
She called the nomination blatant corruption.
It's like juggling chainsaws while people throw rocks at you. I mean, how can one single person possibly appease pharmaceutical companies, anti-abortion advocates, and RFK Jr.'s anti-pesticide movement all at the same time?
This raises an important question, right? Because they can't. No one can. And that is the paralysis of the confirmation process. The FDA commissioner's actual job is to referee these monumental, unresolved issues.
Right.
If confirmed, she inherits a desk full of crises. Regulating ultra-processed foods, setting standards for antidepressants, figuring out what to do with youth vaping products.
Huge issues.
And managing the highly contentious access to the abortion pill, mifepristone. But before Dr. Overton can referee the nation's public health, she has to somehow referee the people who nominated her. It's just wild. And this bitter fight over qualifications, over who is fit to lead, it isn't isolated to public health.
No, not at all.
Because the newsletter highlights that the exact same dynamic is playing out inside the Pentagon, where they are actively arguing over how to measure future military leaders.
Yes, the Army's ROTC program is caught in this bizarre bureaucratic tug of war over standardized testing.
Let me break down the timeline here because it perfectly illustrates the chaos.
Okay.
So on August 5th, a memo goes out proposing new, strict minimum academic standards for incoming ROTC cadets.
Yeah.
They wanted it by January 2027.
Right.
They wanted cadets to have a 20 on the ACT, a 1,000 on the SAT, or a score in the 50th percentile on the military's ASVAB test.
And the memo stated they needed to cultivate intelligent and adaptive officers.
Right, which is a massive shift from how it works now.
Huge shift. Currently, if you want an ROTC scholarship, you need a 2.5 high school GPA, and you have to take the SAT or ACT, but there is no mandatory floor for the score itself.
You just have to take.
You just take it.
Which matters a lot to our listeners. I mean, if you have a teenager looking at ROTC as a way to pay for college, these memos aren't just red tape. They dictate whether your kid gets their education funded.
Exactly.
But then, just days after setting these concrete requirements, the Army completely yanked the memo, saying it needed further staffing and analysis.
It reveals a severe disconnect between political leadership and the entrenched military establishment.
Yeah.
Because the push for these higher quantifiable standards is reportedly being driven by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth.
Right.
He wants a harder, more academically capable force.
Yeah.
But key Army leaders were apparently not even consulted before that memo was blasted out.
They just got blindsided.
Yeah. And to make it more confusing, some internal officials even leaked that they thought the proposed standards were actually too low.
Wait, really? So the defense secretary issues a mandate for higher standards, the Army withdraws it because they weren't asked, and half the building thinks the numbers are wrong anyway.
That's the Pentagon for you.
But looking at the actual metric, does a 1,000 on the SAT actually mean someone will be a good combat leader? I mean, when bullets start flying, does your ability to solve a quadratic equation keep you from freezing up?
Well, that is the fundamental argument against these metrics.
Right.
Critics within the military argue that standardized test scores do not correlate with resilience or tactical decision-making or, leadership under fire.
Yeah.
But what this story truly highlights is the friction of the bureaucracy itself.
Mm-hmm.
They are paralyzed by process. They can't set a standard for combat readiness because they can't even agree on which office has the authority to issue the memo in the first place.
So while the Senate spends months agonizing over FDA confirmations, and the Pentagon is locked in a civil war over who gets to approve an ACT score requirement, the final piece of today's deep dive reveals a completely different kind of power in Washington.
A very different kind.
A kind of power that doesn't require a Senate hearing, It doesn't need a bureaucratic memo or an advanced degree.
It's the unwritten power of proximity.
Exactly. Let us talk about Natalie Harp. She is the 35-year-old executive assistant to President Donald Trump. And she is suddenly the center of a massive political firestorm because of one passing comment from Democratic Senator John Ossoff.
Normally, to have the ear of the president and influence global policy, you have to go through months of brutal Senate vetting.
Right.
The public gets to look at your entire life, your finances, your beliefs. But this story highlights the ultimate backdoor to influence.
So Ossoff was at a campaign event in Georgia. He was taking a jab at Trump's work ethic, and he said, quote, he wants to build his ballroom and travel with Natalie on their apparently defenseless flying palace gifted by the Emir of Qatar.
Just dropped her name right in there.
That single name drop set the media ablaze. Trump fired back, calling Ossoff a Pee Wee Herman lookalike.
Naturally.
The White House communications director aggressively attacked Ossoff. Conservatives called it sexism. Democrats leaned into the drama. Now, the source explicitly notes there's absolutely no evidence of an improper relationship here.
Right, that needs to be clear.
But what is fascinating is the sheer raw influence of her day-to-day job.
She has been a constant presence at Trump's side since at least 2022, according to Fox News. She's at court with him. She survived both assassination attempts nearby.
Wow.
And Republican Senator John Barrasso essentially confirmed her status as the ultimate gatekeeper. Wow. He pointed out that if Trump isn't answering the phone, you call Natalie to get the message through.
But it's how she curates information that blows my mind. Because she operates a traveling mobile office complete with a portable printer.
Yes.
Her job involves quickly printing out articles, social media posts, and what the source bluntly calls propaganda, and placing it directly in front of the president. In an age of digital algorithms, she is the human algorithm.
What's fascinating here is, Tommy Viator, co-host of Pod Save America, he had a really interesting read on this.
What'd he say?
He pointed out that Ossoff didn't make a direct accusation. He just said enough to make everyone else do the talking.
Right.
And the resulting media frenzy isn't really about a scandal. It's about exposing the machinery of informal power. When you control the portable printer, you control the inputs for the most powerful person on the planet.
You curate his worldview, page by page.
Exactly.
So, what does this all mean? We've traced a massive arc today.
We really have.
We started with a $40 trillion national debt that is directly driving up your mortgage rates and leaving us totally exposed to global shocks, like the geopolitical chaos currently threatening the Strait of Hormuz and spiking global oil prices.
Yep.
We examined how our physical highways and railways are literally buckling under extreme heat, forcing engineers to abandon historical data and, just paint the train tracks white.
Grab a bucket of peat.
Right. And we watched the bureaucratic paralysis of trying to find confirmed leadership, whether that a nominee trying to survive the FDA confirmation buzzsaw or the Army fighting itself over an SAT score memo.
It's a fascinating study in contrasts, particularly between formal and informal systems of power. I mean, think about it. We spent almost this entire deep dive looking at massive, rigid structures. The Federal Highway Administration bogged down in updating decades-old climate models.
Right.
The Senate locked in complex battles over public health mandates. The Pentagon totally paralyzed over a single memo about test scores.
Yeah.
These are institutions bound by endless rules, hearings, and procedures. Yet, at the very peak of global power, arguably the most effective way to shape the worldview of the President of the United States isn't through a Senate-confirmed white paper or a rigorous bureaucratic process. It arose through a 35-year-old aide with a portable printer.
Wow.
It leaves you wondering, how much of our daily lives are actually governed by the rigid formal rules we argue about all day, and how much is governed by the sheer unwritten power of proximity?
When you put it like that, it makes you view the entire Washington machine in a completely different light. It's wild to think about.
We'll leave you to mull that over.